if my speech isn't the greatest. I had a bit of an episode, and they're not sure if I've had a small stroke or if a vertigo's just re-inflamed migraine or in a ear. I couldn't get to the Patriots March yesterday in London, which I was absolutely gutted about, and I probably won't be able to stand for the ADF up in South Bedfordshire and Leighton Buzzards. So it's not worth standing for something if you can't do the job for your residents. Should you win, is it? Yeah, I don't think so anyway. But gutted on both parts. Great to see the big turnout in London. I did laugh though. Some of the news outlets, Sky News, the Mail, 1,000 people, couple of thousand people. Yeah, right, okay. I'll tell you what they can't do. They can't. Well, they're not journalists, and I'll tell you what, they can't count either. They must be in bottom of their maths classes because it's not a propaganda channel, so they must just be thick, numerically inept. But I wasn't going to do anything. But I saw a Sky News editorial on the truther movement, and I was so amazed at what a piece of propaganda it was. And it also made me realise that the establishment must be getting quite scared of how many people are waking up out there. I went to the Stand in the Light festival a couple of weeks ago. Here I am at the Stand in the Light festival in the Lake District, and it's raining. Hope it stops, because it's a shame for the organisers and the people obviously that have come. Only a few turned out, as you see so far, so fingers crossed. Not too sure about going in there for a reading, I'll be honest. Disco tent where it's all happening. Still Friday. Oh, there's a UK column tent. I'll have a look in there in a minute. I was promoting the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom, and the weather ruined the weekend, but I was there on a nice sunny Saturday and the Friday, and spoke to lots of people and told them about the ADF. But what I found was such a nice bunch of people. The atmosphere, particularly in the dance tents and that, was just so nice. None of this that you get at some things where you can feel that tension in the air and you feel there might be trouble. Absolutely none of it. And what I also found was a big respect for other people's views. There were people there whose views I didn't agree with. David Icke, who I think does great work. I don't particularly believe on his reptilian theories, so I don't believe we've got a flat earth. But if people do their research and come to that conclusion, who am I to say they're wrong? The only reason I say they're definitely wrong is because of the indoctrination I've had in school and right throughout, and the normal parameters that I've been given and that my brain works by. But I just met a really load of nice people. Didn't agree with them all on every subject, but respected their opinion. So it was a great festival, lots of nice people. And then I see this Sky News expose.
We're not going through the looking glass here, down the rabbit hole, or any other metaphor. We're going to a soggy field in Cumbria.
Presented by a bloke who's just as good at putting up a tent as I am, and probably not quite as good a journalist as I probably am, and I'm not a journalist. So he starts off, and it starts off right at the start with images of going down rabbit holes, Alice through the looking glass, presumably getting across to the viewer subliminally. These people that he's visiting are mad as hatters.
This is real life, where the conspiracy theory movement, born out of COVID, has become a true community, one that is here to stay.
It's like 9/11. That was all a bit, wasn't it? We all know that that was an inside job.
With its own festivals, its own celebrities.
He calls it a conspiracy theory movement. Got a woman talking about 9/11 right from the start. Personally, I don't know what happened at 9/11, but I tell you what I do know. World Trade 7 at the back of the Twin Towers wasn't brought down by fire. That's what I do know. And you know how I know that? Because I've listened to all the engineers and all the scientists who say that that building, which I believe had all the evidence in against George Bush's brother to do with Enron, was it? All the evidence just disappeared in one go. Just a convenient coincidence, obviously.
Where children are taught to chant its slogans.
I do not consent! No!
We spent days and nights inside and found a carnival of free thinking. There are all sorts of dividing lines in British life, things we don't agree on, political, cultural, ideological. But here, perhaps, is the deepest, when one part of the population rejects the other's version of reality.
He goes on that children are taught to chant slogans. Well, I watched a similar sort of show. They weren't taught to shout slogans. They were taking part in an awareness event. They weren't being read to by deviants in suspenders and basques, and maybe Sky News should do an expose on the way the transgender movement has infected our schools. And I'm not on about normal transgender people who I've got a lot of time for and a lot of respect and should never get abuse. I'm on about this agenda pushing a minority in front of our children's faces, telling them lies about biological sex, all done by the cultural Marxists who are now behind our education systems, our civil service and our government. Perhaps Sky News could do an expose on them, or are they just a conspiracy theory?
Keep going, keep going. Say to the river to the sea. Free Palestine! Say to the river to the sea. Actually, from the river to the sea. He knows the whole thing. Say it. Here we are. You want to hear say it. Free Palestine! From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. Gang. Palestine will be free.
Do you have a message for the kids in Palestine?
Free, free,
Palestine!
free, free,
Palestine!
free, free.
My love! Message for the children in Palestine.
Yes, be careful from where you're going and don't get lost.
That is amazing. Did you know that you're a hero for being here? Did you know that?
I didn't know.
Well, I'm telling you now, there's people that are way older than you that are scared to be here. I'm very proud of you. Have a nice day, my love.
Thank you.
Today, why are you marching?
To tell Israel stop killing Gaza.
Can I hear you say free, free,
Free, free,
Palestine!
free, free.
Palestine!
That's a total guy.
Do you have a message for the kids in Palestine? Yeah, what do you want to say?
Bubbles.
Bubbles? What's that? Oh, we love you. Is that what you said? My love.
I'm here to West Cumbria, just outside the Lake District actually, and we're going to the weekend Truth Festival, WTF for short. I think most people would describe it as a conspiracy theory festival. They would say they're seeking the truth and that they're awake, but there's actually all sorts of these festivals happening all summer long. This is just the first. Other events are being held in Sussex, Hertfordshire, Glasgow, Dorset, Surrey, here again in Cumbria and in Leicestershire. It's taken long and careful negotiation with the organisers, Nick and Kev, to allow me inside this one and to allow us to film. As you'll see, there is hostility towards the mainstream media among the attendees here, but they finally agreed.
Basically, it's a gathering together of like-minded people who basically think alternatively to mainstream.
We talked about this, how a lot of people came to this, especially through COVID and through lockdowns and vaccines. This feels like a community that has existed beyond that, that there's something a bit more durable. Is that a fair assessment of it?
Yeah, it's a fair assessment. It is more durable. I think COVID has sort of woken people up to other things that go on, and I think naturally we've gravitated towards each other because we're all very similar.
That's the reason I've come here, to understand why a movement born in lockdown not only exists years after it lifted, but appears to be growing. It is a huge community online, with hundreds of thousands of people subscribing to the main Twitter and Telegram account.
So he says most people would describe this as a conspiracy theorist festival. Most people? Well, you certainly don't speak on my behalf, you establishment ghoul. Most people I know would call it a truther festival, or a free thinking festival, or a awake festival. People that have awoken to how evil this government can be. Not just our government, but unelected institutions like the World Economic Forum, like the World Health Organization, like the United Nations. People are waking up to how evil these people can be. And this evil government thing isn't something new. You had the American government trying to blow an aircraft out of the sky over Cuba so they could blame the Cubans because they didn't want communism on their shores. Going to blow one of their own holiday jets out of the sky full of American people. It was vetoed by President Kennedy, but they were going to do that. We've got our own government spraying people in Bedfordshire and Norwich to see what effect it would have on the people below. We've got our own government doing tests on our underground to see what effects bacteria would have. We're talking about greed-fueled psychopaths. Maybe do an expose on that, Sky News.
It's taken long and careful negotiation with the organisers, Nick and Kev, to allow me inside this one, and to allow us to film. As you'll see, there is hostility towards the mainstream media among the attendees here. But they finally agreed.
Basically, it's a gathering together of like-minded people who basically think alternatively to mainstream.
We talked about this, how a lot of people came to this, especially through COVID and through lockdowns and vaccines. This feels like a community that has existed beyond that, that there's something a bit more durable. Is that a fair assessment of it?
Yeah, it's a fair assessment. It is more durable. I think COVID has sort of woken people up to other things that go on, and I think naturally we've gravitated towards each other because we're all very similar.
He says there was long negotiations with the organisers before they let him attend. I'm not surprised. I probably wouldn't let him attend. Do you know why? Because you're going to get the sort of propaganda that was produced at the end of it. Oh, dearie me, I just laughed out loud when he came out with that.
As the evening draws in, I make friends with our neighbours. Teresa and Andy are both from Stockport. They met and made friends through the conspiracy community. They're warm, genuinely kind, and offer me relentless cups of tea.
I'm certainly not an anti-vaxxer. I've had all my vaccinations throughout my life, my daughter and my grandchildren, but this one was different for me. I didn't think I'd be here 3 years ago in a place that I am, but this journey's been a great journey for me because I've met such wonderful people.
Teresa is a former civil servant. She was living alone during lockdown. She didn't bubble with anyone else.
It just didn't feel right to me. So then I started doing some, digging and so forth. And I think through social media, I don't know, that I met up with other people. And hence that's why I'm here today. I initially met up with all these people, or a lot of people that are here today, on Rebels on the Roundabout. We do that on a Friday night in Stockport. That's where I met Andy and these lovely people that are here this evening.
We'll need to unpick some of this. Rebels on Roundabouts is a protest group that says COVID was ruthlessly exploited by a global elite through their puppet politicians and the mainstream media, and is part of a sinister control and depopulation agenda. Specific false theories like this one already have a large natural audience. According to YouGov polling, 4% of the British population, more than 2 million people, believe it is definitely true that a single group of people secretly control events and rule the world together.
I recall during the COVID reading the book The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab, and that scared me. You know, I thought, is that the world that we're aiming for?
The Great Reset is an initiative from the World Economic Forum, or WEF, the organisation founded by Klaus Schwab, a hate figure for this crowd. It is admittedly poorly named, a grandiose, slightly sinister title that was always going to be catnip for conspiracists. And most people here believe the Great Reset is really a plan to impose a worldwide totalitarian government, and it encompasses other restrictions like ultra-low emission zones, ULEZ for short, low traffic neighbourhoods, LTNs, or the idea of 15-minute cities. It's quite anodyne though, isn't it? It's sort of a WEF, quite sort of bureaucratic. When I read it, I don't...
Well, our politicians go there. Why is the cabinet full of people who've been through their sort of
training,
management systems and everything?
And he talks about rebels on the roundabout being a group that don't agree with the narrative, that think that there's a body like the World Economic Forum who put on their own website their aim is that you'll own nothing and be happy. People that don't like someone like the unelected Klaus Schwab and his book The Great Reset being the outline for our future. Klaus Schwab, whose father supplied the Nazis with ammunition and equipment during the war, and Klaus, who took over from his father with the same company in the same line of business. Trustworthy sort of guy. Maybe Sky News do an expose on Klaus Schwab. There's loads of shite and I'll even help you with it if your journalists aren't up to it and they're still putting their tents up. He talks about COVID being used as a control tool by the establishment. Is that still a theory? Every day facts come out about this experimental gene therapy on an emergency licence produced by the second most fined pharmaceutical company in history, if you're talking about Pfizer, and some other of the most fined pharmaceutical companies in history, if you're talking about Moderna and AstraZeneca. Every day wasn't tested properly. There are harms. During COVID, old people in homes were given the wrong medication. Every day, more and more comes to light about there was no science behind 6 foot apart. Whoever thought there was? There was no science behind just having 6 people in your house. Whoever thought there was? You have to be a raving loony. You have to go through the looking glass. You have to go down a rabbit hole to believe all that absolute BS. People often say to me, when did you realise that COVID was being used for control? And I think when I started disagreeing with the narrative was when someone said, and I'd already listened to loads and loads and loads of scientists who are high up in their field who didn't agree with the official narrative. Scientists who aren't getting a paycheck or have got shares in pharmaceutical companies like certain people around the government and certain medical advisors had. I listened to people like John Ioannidis at Stanford University who said masks are a waste of time, and looking at the genome of this said, yeah, it's been enhanced by man, but it's not that dangerous. I listened to those sort of people. And then what really done me when I think about it was when someone said, one of the symptoms is not having any symptoms. Yes, that's what they said. One of the symptoms is having no symptoms. Reminded me of the Emperor's New Clothes, Remember when the Emperor, I think I remember it right from a kid, he went riding through the streets stark naked, and people were too scared to shout out that he was naked. And one said to the other, no, he's wearing clothes. And the other one said, oh, yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. Let's go outside on a Thursday night and clap him for wearing clothes. But yeah, that's what done me. That was when they said one of the symptoms is not having any symptoms. And this is when it can be the most infectious, because you don't know you're spreading it. Now, COVID, no matter if it comes from a lab, a bat, or whatever, and I do think it's a lab. I'm a conspiracy theorist. A lot of scientists do as well. There's more scientists in my corner than there are in the bat corner. But wherever it came from, it's just a respiratory virus. Not as bad as flu if you listen to some, or Armageddon if you listen to others. But it's just a respiratory virus. I think we can all agree with that, even Sky News. And normally, with a respiratory virus, it's shed by droplets. Sneezed, coughed. It's a respiratory virus. It's a COVID virus. All the others are like that. This one can be spread if you've got no droplets. If you don't know you've got it. If you have to be tested on such a high cycle on a PCR that's not fit for purpose anyway, to find any of this virus. You're not ill at all, but you're dangerous. You're dangerous. And if you don't have the vaccine, you're hurting Granny. Well, if Granny's had the vaccine and it's so safe and effective, why should she be worried about me? She's safe. Perhaps Sky News could do an expose on that, because they certainly didn't do it at the time. One of the symptoms is having no symptoms. Let's try it with another respiratory virus. Shall we phone up work? Hello? Yeah, can I speak to the boss, please? Boss comes. Yeah, it's Glenn. Yeah, I won't be in today. Yeah, I've got the flu. No, I'm not in bed. No, I've actually just been out for a run and a game of tennis. Yeah. No, I'm absolutely fine. I'm not sniffling. I'm not coughing. No, I don't ache. No, nothing. That's why I'm worried in case I've got the flu. Yeah, no, I won't. I can't come in like this. I don't want to spread it, do I? Try that with your boss. See how you get on, because it's another respiratory virus. COVID, it worked. Why? Because of the narrative. Because heretics like Sky News were pumping up propaganda, going down the rabbit hole, going through the looking glass, and not really worried about the truth. They didn't want you to have the truth. They're a propaganda outlet for the establishment, for the very people that those truthers don't trust. Says Klaus Schwab is a hate figure for these people. Well, who wouldn't be a hate figure if they wanted everyone to own nothing and be happy? And Klaus Schwab's father and a few of his mates were into eugenics, a depopulation program. So why would you trust the guy? Why would anyone trust Klaus Schwab? I'm not on about truthers or people who are all being put into one bowl because they dared to ask a question. People like myself. Why would anyone trust Klaus Schwab? With his history, with his background, with his thoughts, with the books that he's wrote, with his influence, with his mates, Bill and Melinda Gates, people that want you to eat bugs. Why would you trust them? Why would you trust Bill Gates, who a lot of scientists say is evil personified? Why would you trust them? Why wouldn't you do an expose on them? Go on, Sky News, there's another challenge for you.
Down at the festival, Gillian and others gather the children.
I do not consent! Roar! Well done. So now you know how to stand in your magical power.
I Do Not Consent was a rallying cry for anti-vaxxers during lockdown. It's now a slogan for the freedom movement, and they're taught it young. This is probably the most troubling part of the festival, the part where legitimate free speech perhaps crosses into something darker. Speaking to people, it's clear the pandemic was such a big initiator, and all of us were anxious, all of us were worried. Then you had people like Teresa going through huge personal trauma on top of that, lockdowns adding to a sense of powerless. So I suppose it's no surprise that people wanted to find some meaning, and some people found that meaning in this worldview, in this community here, in articles online. And the question is, what happens after that? Because there is violent rhetoric here, and primary school-aged children have a front row seat. I listen in on several talks and hear that COVID was an attempted genocide, that the military is secretly running the country, that there is a Satanist cult planning something very nefarious, and that I, as an employee of the mainstream media, are part of it.
So they're gaslighting you, that's...
He says that there was violent rhetoric. Well, I didn't see any violent rhetoric. They brought a guy up, Mark Steele. I know nothing about him, and I don't particularly want to. If I'd listened to him, I would go and do my research. Apparently he got an assault charge, was it in the mid-80s or something? I don't know. And they're calling him right-wing. Well, they call everyone right-wing. Now, I used to be left-wing. Because I attended anti-fascist marches, I was a lefty. Now, because I don't agree with everything the government says, because I don't agree with uncontrolled illegal immigration where people come into the country with no documentation, I'm far right. There's Hitler and there's me just to the right of him. Because I don't think our infrastructure has been updated to handle all these extra people without our own people. And when I say our own people, I'm on about legal immigrants from other countries who've come here as well, because I'm concerned about them. And because I speak to people in places like Hackney where there's a 16-year social housing waiting list. Because I speak to them, I don't think it's fair bringing even more people in before we do something about the infrastructure. I'm right wing. And you know what? I honestly don't care. Anyone that knows me knows I'm not a racist, but I'm a pragmatist. And I'll say it as I see it. So yeah, apparently full of violent rhetoric. I didn't see any violent rhetoric from the speakers at the Truth Festival that I was at. All I just saw was people giving an alternative view, and most of the time I agreed with that view. Sky talk about violent rhetoric, and yet they'll put Tony Blair on. They'll put war criminal Tony Blair and his assistant in hate, Alistair Campbell. They'll give them as much airtime as they want. Speaking about ID, speaking about digital currency, speaking about everything that the WEF stand for. They'll give Starmer, another Davos lovey, all the time in the world. Why don't you do exposés on them? Why don't we have an expose on Starmer? It's time at the Department of Public Prosecutions. I'd love to know if he actually did see the files relating to Savile, all those grooming gangs in Rotherham, Telford. I'd love to see what he actually knew. And if he didn't know, I'd love to see him brought to account as to why he doesn't know what the civil servants under him are actually doing. Because if you're head of the department and you get knighted for it, presumably you should be doing something. What was he doing? Violent rhetoric. I heard people say that when Labour get in, because they will, because there's enough gullible people still asleep, still listening to Sky News, still listening to BBC News, still believing everything that little box in the corner tells them. So it'll be Labour. One of the smallest turnouts ever, because I don't think we've got time to get people to vote for smaller parties and independents in their local area who really care for them. So we're going to have maybe 2 more years of corrupt, greed-fueled psychopaths governing us with people like Sky News supporting them every step of the way. We're going to have Starmer. We're going to have Cyril Neela, Davos Lovey, Keir Starmer, who is going to be even worse than Roland Rat. And the gullible people would have voted for it. You get the government you deserve. And you'll have Sky News still going through with all this propaganda. Zelensky's a good guy, Putin's not. And I'm not saying Putin is a good guy, but neither is Zelensky. It's a control operation. It's a regime change operation, and a very dangerous one. And it's a money transfer operation. Your money being transferred to the Ukraine, which will end up with BlackRock when they rebuild the Ukraine. And they eventually get round the table with Russia and it's all settled. Your money, you've paid for it, so I suppose it's your war. You own that war. You and me, our tax money. We can't afford social housing. We can't afford to supplement energy bills. We've got wars to pay for. Proxy wars. That's what I heard. In the tents at this evil place of the truthers. People who give lying war criminals like Blair and co a stage at every opportunity, and have got the cheek, the audacity to come on and say they heard, when people talk about civil unrest, they heard violent rhetoric. If people can't get what they want through the ballot box, it'll end up in civil unrest. It's as simple as that. That's not violent rhetoric, that's being honest. And I don't think we're that far off it. I really, really don't. So I had to say that. I had to come out of me enforced, oh look, I'm sweating there, my enforced retirement to say that. But Sky News, you really are the pits. You really are the height of hypocrisy and the epitome of a propaganda channel. Let me know what you guys and girls think, and thanks for supporting the channel. Please subscribe. Speak to you soon when I'm a bit better. Thanks for watching.